Jaycee Horn is one of the best corners in the NFL. The only problem is he has not been healthy the first 3 seasons as a Carolina Panther, but will 2024 finally be the year he stays healthy and shows the rest of the league just how good he is? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers right now with you 3 days a week. But starting on Monday, we're back to in-season mode, which means I'm talking Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Friday, July 26th, the weekly Friday mailbag is back. So either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get your weekly Friday mailbag questions in once training camp rolls in here, starting on the 24th, reporting on the 19th for the rookies, 23rd for the vets, and then practice on the 24th. Get those questions in right around then, and I'll answer them here on the show on the 26th. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Back here once again, breaking down the Carolina Panthers roster, each position group ahead of the start of 2024 season. On Wednesday, we talk about the inside linebacker group. Shaq Thompson coming off of a rather gruesome leg injury and heading into his 10th season in the NFL, 10th season here in Carolina. Will this be Shaq's last, and will Shaq be able to bounce back and show the kind of leadership and talent he showed over the last couple seasons when he's been healthy? Talked all of that down on Wednesday. But on today's show, we're focusing in on the cornerback room here in Carolina. And I'm just going to be pretty transparent with you, as I always am. I am concerned about this cornerback room here in Carolina this season. A lot of questions I have going into the year, and a lot of questions that certainly need to be answered to quell the concerns that I have, and you may also have heading into this 2024 season, as Jerry Rivera is back for his second year as the Panthers defensive coordinator. Back for his 4th season as a Panther is Jaycee Horn. As we start off every single one of these positional breakdowns, we talk about the biggest name and the biggest story about that name within a position group. And the biggest name and the biggest story is by far Jaycee Horn, and whether he will finally be healthy here in 2024. Through his first 3 seasons in the NFL as a Carolina Panther, Horn has missed 29 out of a possible 51 games, which is not ideal. Obviously, we have seen that Jaycee, when healthy, is a very talented player. The problem is, as I just illustrated, and we've talked about ad nauseum here on the show, he has not been healthy. And you really question, damn, what if the Panthers took Patrick Surtain, who has not missed a lot of time when playing for the Denver Broncos? Would things be different? You can always question that, but I don't think you can question Jaycee Horn's talent. You just need him to stay healthy. And looking back at the injuries, 2021 came out, was excellent against the Jets, was great against the Saints, great in that first half against the Texans on Thursday night. Then just gets on that turf there at NRG Stadium, breaks his foot, misses the final 14 games of the year, possibly could have come back later on in the season, but didn't make a lot of sense for a guy that you took off the board as the first defensive player taken in that 2021 draft. It made sense just to let him recover, get him back there for 2022, where he did start off on PUP, but then was ready to go. And he missed 2 games of rib injury in the middle of that season. Then just friendly fire. Jeremy Chin, the former Panther, ran into Horn, broke his wrist, and that possibly cost Carolina Panthers the division title there in 2022, as CJ Henderson and Keith Taylor just could not do anything with Tom Brady and Mike Evans that afternoon in Tampa Bay. Then last year, Jaycee didn't even make it through a half. The first half of the season, game half, not the first half, like games that were played. The first half of the first game, he feels something in his hamstring pull, and he's out for the next 10 games. Then he comes back, and right before Jacksonville, he's active, and then he says, actually, my foot's bothering me. I cannot go. Total all that up, and that's 29 games that he's missed in the first 51 games of his career here in the NFL. But illustrating again, just how good of a player he is when he's actually on the field. Looking at his PFF grades last year, Pro Football Focus, overall grade was a 84.1. If you take away the snap minimum that PFF has, and when they kind of look at guys that qualify, if you take that away, he would have been the 8th best corner in the NFL last season. The 8th best. So you got a top 10 corner if you take away the amount of snaps that he did not play. Now, his run defense grade was 79.7, which is really solid, knowing that some of these corners in the past have not been willing tacklers. That is absolutely not Jaycee Horn. He's somebody who absolutely wants to get in there and get a hat on a player. And his coverage grade, 83.0. Again, if you ignore the stat minimum that PFF has, he would have been the 12th best in the NFL. This man is a top 10 corner. This man is absolutely worthy of being selected in the top 10 by the Panthers when they took him. And yes, it would have been nice to have him been healthy, and maybe Patrick Surtain would have been healthy, but you cannot deny that Jaycee Horn is a hell of a player. The only problem is, as we know, has not been out there. You don't even look deeper into his stats. Looking at the opponent completion percentage when he's been targeted, going back to his rookie year, he allowed 28.6% completions, 55.0 his second year, the year he played the most snaps. Then last year, 58.1. Really good. Look at his opponent passer rating, rookie year, 39.6. His next year, 62.4. Last year, 84.1, which blows all the other guys at the position over the last couple of seasons out of the water. The Panthers had a decision to make by May 1. Were they going to exercise his fifth-year option? And they decided that they're going to pick it up. Looking at overthecap.com, it is projected to be $12.4 million next season in 2025 for Jaycee Horn to be a Carolina Panther. Now, had they decided that they didn't want to do it, did not want to take the risk of having a player guaranteed all that money, whether he's healthy or not, especially if he's not healthy this year, but even next year, they decided it made more sense to give him the $12.4 million to potentially not give it to him, have him ball out, have him be healthy, and then if they had to franchise tag him, give him $19.4 million next season. So a $7 million decision the Panthers made as far as that bet, but also really a $12.4 million decision the Panthers made that they believe in Jaycee Horn and know that looking at the rest of the cornerback room, which we're going to do momentarily, he's their best guy, and he's the guy that they want to build around and really need to be able to build around, and it all requires Jaycee being healthy. That's the story. We've talked about it. There's not really much else to say about Jaycee Horn. When he plays, he's great. But the problem is he doesn't play, and until that narrative goes away, that will be the discussion topic when it comes to Jaycee Horn. So wishing for him, like his sake, not even the sake of me or you or anyone who supports a team, but for the player himself, that he can stay healthy, and that a lot of y'all out there on social media, the thumb thugs, can stop trashing somebody because he keeps getting injured, and it's not like he wants to be hurt in the first place. This is his love. This is his passion, and I am certainly rooting for him and hoping that he can quiet all the folks out there that just have no sense of compassion whatsoever, also empathy. Kind of work on it, possibly. Just a suggestion. So Jaycee Horn, hoping the best for him, but can he play a full season? To be determined here in Carolina. What's also to be determined is anyone else in this cornerback room worth having a starting role here in Carolina in 2024? We'll talk about the depth chart here with the cornerback room in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes guesswork out of buying MLB tickets, and next week, the MLB All-Star Game is going on, and if you want to go check out some games this weekend, go ahead. Hit up Game Time, get those tickets. You can wait right before first pitch and get a great deal, or you can wait next week for the Midsummer Classic. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's take a look at the rest of the cornerback room here in Carolina. Talking about Jaycee Horn, the only concern I have about him, which is a big concern, is his availability. I do not question his talent. I do not question his production when he's actually out on the field. The only thing I question about him is, will he be on the field? And that's probably better than what I can say about the rest of the guys we're going to talk about here momentarily on the show. JC, when he's out there, one side of the ball, whatever scheme you're going to run, you ain't got to worry about him. Everyone else, I'm going to have a lot of questions about these guys heading into the season, as this, to me, may be, outside of tight end, the weakest position room in Carolina this upcoming season, maybe even safety, which we'll talk about on tomorrow's show. But certainly you take out Jaycee Horn, which has been the case the last couple seasons, and it gets scary for the Carolina Panthers cornerback room. Talk about Dane Jackson, who should right now be the other starter at the outside cornerback spot. He signed a 2-year deal worth up to $14.5 million. Comes over from Buffalo, where he spent the last 4 seasons after being drafted in the 7th round out of Pittsburgh. So he's back to being a Panther, this time in the NFL, and wearing black and blue, not blue and gold. And Dan Morgan, someone who was there in Buffalo at the time when he was drafted, someone who apparently was banging on the table for them to take Dane Jackson. So no surprise that now Dane Jackson comes to Carolina for his first real shot at being a starting corner in the league. He started 28 games in his 4 seasons in Buffalo, mainly because Tre'Davious White could not stay healthy. And in those times when he got to play, it was mixed results. Mainly, he was their 3rd corner in Buffalo, but he got an opportunity last season, started a couple games. Really, in 2022 was the most part when he really started. But looking back at his PFF stats last year, his overall grade was a 62.7, which was 71st out of 127 qualifying cornerbacks. His coverage grade, 69.7. That was 42nd out of 126 cornerbacks, which that's pretty solid. Run defense grade, and we talked about a lot of corners here in the past. Carolina have not really wanted to be willing tacklers. Well, Dane Jackson has struggled in this department. 28.8. That was 120th out of 121 qualifying corners against the run last year. Allowed a 74.3 completion percentage last season, which, going back to Jaycee Horn, who had a 58.1. So to kind of give you the difference there, his pass rating allowed was a 109.6. JC, 84.1. Missed tackle percentage. That is concerned. 17.0 missed tackle percentage, according to Pro Football Reference. But go back really to 2022. That's when he was a full-time starter, started 14 games rather, 14 out of 17 games there for Buffalo in 2022. His overall grade then was a 58.6. So he's better in 23 than he was in 22. That was 83rd out of 118 qualifying corners that season. Coverage grade was 60.6. Run grade was a 45.2. Still not great. And PFF is just, again, as I talked to y'all about this, it's one tool, one way to look at it. The eyes don't always match what they put out there. Dane Jackson is really a number 3 guy, not somebody that you would want to depend on to be your second starter, but that's the position the Panthers are in right now. Going back to the rest of his grades there, not even grades, but his rest of his stats. Completion percentage allowed when targeted that season, 59.0. Jaycee Horn that year, his was a 55.0. So not too far off. Pass rating, 82.1. JC's was 62.4 back in 2022. Missed tackle percentage, 10.9%. That is something that is going to be a large concern as Dane Jackson is entering into his second contract, getting the opportunity to be a starter. He's got to be more physical. I don't know if they're going to ask him to do that much in Carolina, but he's going to be a second corner. He has experience playing in the AFC East against some solid receivers down there in Miami, and even in practice there in Buffalo. We'll see how he's able to transition, as he right now is, penciled in, maybe even just got a normal pin, ballpoint pin in there as the starter at corner. I'm not going to say Sharpie, JC's Sharpie. We'll see how it works out, because I do think the Panthers should still be interested in bringing somebody else in. We'll get into that here momentarily. Troy Hill, he's back once again, signed the final week of the preseason last year, which made it pretty clear that, okay, maybe you're going to sign him this late. He played in LA with the Rams under Jerry Rivero, knows the scheme. Clearly this guy was going to be on the roster, and that was the case. Played 16 games last year, had 48 tackles and an interception. Looking at his Pro Football Focus grades, a 61.3 overall. That was 77th out of 127 corners. So going back to Dane Jackson was 71st. Last year, Troy Hill was 77th. Coverage grade 66.9. That was 52nd out of 126 corners. Run defense grade 58.4, 77th out of 121 corners. Plays there in that nickel role right in the slot. He will turn 33 in August, which is a big reason why I think the Carolina Panthers use a 5th-round pick on this next player, Cha Smith-Wade, out of Washington State. In his career with the Cougs, he had 3 interceptions, 18 pass breakups, and going back to the Senior Bowl is where he really broke out, and the NFL looked at him as a guy that certainly was absolutely worth a draft pick. 2 interceptions in the Senior Bowl defensive MVP, and he was someone who played outside corner at Wazoo, then was asked Senior Bowl week, you're a smaller guy. You're probably not going to get a lot of opportunities outside in the NFL. Let's see you at a spot that we believe will be your natural position. And he thrived with those 2 picks in that Senior Bowl game. And that, of course, helped the Carolina Panthers want to take him there in the 5th round. His junior year was the last time he was fully healthy there in the Palouse. He started 13 games. And was honorable mention all Pac-12 after leading the Cougars with 8 pass breakups and tied for the team lead with 3 forced fumbles. Senior season was shortened due to injury. In the first 7 games, which he did play, Smith-Wade had 36 tackles, 2 for loss, and 6 pass breakups. And going back to my draft notes, remember watching the broadcast, Daniel Jeremiah came out and said he can play outside corner, he can slide back and play safety, has excellent burst as a blitzer, is an absolute missile in the run game, someone who can also cover a tight end. And going back and looking at what we have in Dane Jackson potentially against the run and Troy Hill being an older player and against the run, to have someone like Cha Smith-Wade, who's a missile, according to Daniel Jeremiah, in the run game and can be versatile to play outside corner, inside, and even slide back to safety, that's a good pick as far as just the potential there. We'll see whether it turns out on the field, but it makes sense knowing that you have a corner who's playing the inside, who's going to be 33 late next month, heading into the season. Go get somebody younger. Now, all these college players are older because they all use those COVID years and all that, but still, find a younger player who's versatile, who you can get out there and play. So Cha Smith-Wade should play a role here in Carolina, certainly this year. The other guys that can play a role, DiCaprio Bootle, who the Panthers signed to the practice squad last year in September, then was promoted to the active roster a month later in October. He played in 8 games, made 2 starts, 14 tackles. 56% of the special team snaps are available to him. He played as well, and that would be probably the way he makes the roster again. And he and Deshaun Jameson, the other guy we're going to talk about here, both had to step up because of the injuries that we saw to guys like Jaycee Horn last year, and even CJ Henderson. Deshaun Jameson out of Texas was claimed off of waivers from San Francisco following cutdown day last August. He played in 15 games, making 1 start, had 10 tackles. He played 39% of the special team snaps, 2 kickoff returns. And that was one of the things that was interesting about him when he was picked up. There was thought that he could be a returner for the Panthers and really didn't do a lot of returning. But when called upon, him and Bootle, they were okay. You look at the stats deeper, wasn't that great, but what were the expectations when you lose Horn? Henderson, who has been a liability, was also out, and you're bringing Troy Hill off the street. I don't know how much off the street, but you're bringing him late into training camp, and really the training camp's over, preseason, and asking him to step up and to be one of your starters at 32 years old. So those are the contributors I expect to see, at least potential contributors here at the cornerback spot in Carolina heading into 2024. So how many of them will actually make the roster, and will Carolina bring in another corner? We will talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Let's do it again. Let's project the 53-man roster, even though I did not keep track of all the other numbers of guys that I think will potentially make the roster. But again, I talk about this on Wednesday. Probably going to do a show here in the next week or so, projecting the 53 heading into training camp and doing all the numbers right then and there. But looking at the defense so far, I think the defensive line could have more numbers than they had last year on the 53. Looking at edge, because of the injuries you have and the concerns there outside of Clowney, they may not have as many guys on the 53 when starting off. And then even looking at inside linebacker, a lot of guys can make it because of special teams and will make it because of special teams, but you can't keep every single one of them, right? We'll see. But corner, again, because Jero Vero's back, that is going to allow us a better glimpse of how many guys they potentially will keep this season. Last year, they only kept 4 cornerbacks. That was Jaycee Horn. That was Troy Hill. That was also CJ Henderson. And then I forgot who the other one. Probably should have wrote it down. But as I break it down, guaranteed roster spot, roster bubble, practice squad. That's how we have it tiered here in Carolina. Guaranteed to make the roster. Obviously, Jaycee Horn, as long as he's healthy, not on pup, anything like that. Not saying that anything's happened. Jaycee Horn obviously going to be on the roster. Dane Jackson, they signed him to compete, not necessarily be a starter, but to compete for the starting job. He will be on the roster. Then Troy Hill, who they bringing back to again be slotted in there. Not a joke, but to be slotted in there in that slot nickel role. He will be back once again, guaranteed a roster spot. And they kept 4 last year. If they're going to keep a 4th, I would think that Shaw Smith-Wade would be the other guy, as he's versatile. Much like Jamie Robinson was considered to be versatile coming out of Florida State last season, picked in the exact same round, which makes you go, what's Jamie Robinson's role going to be? We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show. We'll break down the safeties here in Carolina. But Shaw Smith-Wade, I think, is going to be a guy that would also be on the roster. I'm going to put on the roster bubble. A 5th round pick, not guaranteed anything. I feel like he's going to be safe. I don't want to speak in absolutes, but I feel like he's going to probably be safe. Wink, wink, nod. So Jaycee Horn, Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, Shaw Smith-Wade. If they're only keeping 4, those are the 4. But the rest of the roster bubble, Deshaun Jameson, DiCaprio, Boodle, both those guys are going to make the roster. It's got to be based off of special teams. 2 new special teams coordinators here in Carolina. Tracy Smith is the head special teams coordinator. Then you have Darren Bates as the assistant special teams coordinator. Not having Chris Tabor here changes the calculus for every single one of those guys that were key special team players last year in Carolina, especially guys that were here the last 2 years with Chris Tabor. So that's going to affect potentially Jameson and Boodle and their ability to make the roster. But they're going to make the roster anyways, and they're going to have to make an impression on special teams. That's the case for anybody who is the 5th or 4th guy at their position everywhere on this roster. So they're on the roster bubble, certainly heading into camp. Then likely practice squad guys ain't going to be here. Lamar Jackson, not the one that you wish would have been the Panthers quarterback maybe a year and a half ago, but the one that was here last year on the practice squad. And then Willie Drew, an undrafted free agent out of Virginia State, would also be a guy that would likely be headed to the practice squad or just not on the roster at all. And I would also say this, as I've said, Deshaun Jameson, DiCaprio, Boodle, if they don't make the roster, much like other guys who have been here in the past that didn't like the roster that are mainly going to be here to play special teams, I see them as, of course, practice squad candidates, but I think they have a better chance of making it. And I believe a guy like Lamar Jackson and Willie Drew will have making the roster in Carolina. Hearing all of that, Jaycee Horn, Dane Jackson, Troy Hill, Shaw Smith-Wade, potentially as your 4 corners. How good do you feel about that? Because I don't really feel good about it at all. Now, let's not say not at all, because there is Jaycee Horn playing, but as we've discussed, the whole availability thing. So it stops me from feeling really good, not even really good, but feeling fine about it, to being I'm slightly concerned, if not a lot concerned about this room, as Dane Jackson is not really, he's at number 3 corner. Let's be honest here. Troy Hill's 33 damn years old, and Shaw Smith-Wade is a rookie who is going to be playing a role where he played it well at the Senior Bowl, but that's the Senior Bowl. This is the National Football League, and he's going to have to really get with it if he's going to be someone who can be an impact player for Carolina. Not saying he can't be, but that's a lot to ask for a rookie. And at some point in time, the Panthers are going to have to start hitting on these rookies. And it feels like this season, they're going to ask a lot from these guys. Xavier Legette, obviously, they're going to ask a lot of him. Jonathan Brooks, when he's healthy, going to ask a lot about of him. Tavion Sanders, Trevin Wallace, probably not so much. But Shaw Smith-Wade, yeah, dude, he might have to step up and play. I still feel like they need to find another starter on the outside or someone who can compete at that role. We're going to continue to talk with Stephon Gilmore. There is no update. The last time we got any sort of an update was back in, I think either late May, early June. Joe Person of The Athletic came out and said, there's no movement. Nothing's happening. He was all supposed to have like off-season shoulder surgery. Not quite sure whether he's had it yet, where he's at with that rehab. That could be something that has him starting off on PUP and slows him down. And Stephon Gilmore's at the age where he ain't trying to go out there and be there for OTAs, mandatory minicamp. He's going to want to show up once things get rolling here in 2 weeks' time, and probably really in a month time. Let's get to the middle of August when we're playing preseason games. That's when I think he'd actually want to be out there and not have to deal with all the training camp practices here in Carolina. So we'll see how that works out. And here's the thing. As I mentioned, of a lot of position groups and the opportunity that they could add, the Panthers were the worst team in the NFL last year. They may not have gotten the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, unfortunately, but they will have the number 1 spot when it comes to the waiver wire. So the Panthers will have an opportunity once roster cutdowns happen to put in their waiver claims and get their preference. So that is one thing to understand and to be encouraged by, to be maybe excited about. I don't know how you want to feel about it, but that is absolutely a positive for Carolina. Being bad can sometimes have its benefits. Now, the Panthers made a trade that did not allow them to benefit the way a lot of people don't like them benefit, but they can benefit this way where they can be first in line for some players at positions of need. And I look at cornerback outside of Jaycee Horn, absolutely as a position of need heading into 2024 here in Carolina. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council. The 26th of this month, 2 weeks from now, gonna be back answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Then once we get to the season, it'll be a Wednesday mailbag. But still, at me, DM me, follow me, do your thing, get in those questions. Not yet. Give it like 10 days. Then you can start asking me questions, and I'll answer them starting on the 26th once again. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow as we're going to talk about the safety group here in Carolina. There have been some changes. Are they positive changes? Are they changes? We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show.